Okay, well, so why are we here today? So I wanted to do this webinar for a couple of reasons. The main one was I did a version of this webinar in 2024, just after the lawsuits and the settlement, and there was a lot of futurology being done by me and others about what this meant for the industry, and I believe that many times perception can become reality if we're not loud enough of speaking our mind. And that's why back then and still today, I think it's really important to talk about the value of the agent, the value of the buyer agent, as well as the seller agent, and have at least a countering voice to a lot of the doomsaying that has been in our industry for the last 2 years. And so a little bit of it, and I always try my webinars to have an informational aspect and well, what do I do with this aspect? I don't know if I'll hit both successfully today, but I'll do my best. One is to tell a little bit about how I see the history of real estate, and especially the threats that have been from 2015 to here, which have been plenty. Then talk specifically about 2024 and hopefully give you some juicy data of what actually happened after all the scare. And then finally, a little bit about the talk about lead generation and buy side versus sell side. How should I think about growing my business through online lead generation? What are the best paths? And does that coincide with what the industry says or not? So thoughts about the history, right? History of real estate. So since I joined the industry, I think 2015, I was surprised coming into the industry that there's a lot of people within real estate that had a lot of negative opinions about agents and their role in society and in this industry. First, there was a lot of scare about whether technology could replace the tasks being done by the agents. Second, there was always a feeling that commissions being charged by the real estate agents were excessive. And finally, there was always, I come from private equity I guess I didn't introduce myself. I'm starting by the back, but I'm Alvaro Erize. I'm the CEO of CINC. Sorry, Jessica, you need to tell me, Alvaro, you haven't introduced yourself.
Sorry. I'll keep you straight going forward.
So I joined Sync in 2016, 15, 16, and then started running Sync a little bit later in 2017, and have been since then all around here. And so I have the view of someone that came from private equity, but now has a good 10 years in the industry. And one of those things that surprised me was that within the industry, there was a lot of self-doubt about the value itself. Not everyone, but a lot of people that did. And then from outside, private equity was constantly preaching, well, we have to pour money into this industry because we're going to replace all of this commission being gathered by agents. And we are able to do what travel industry happened, and we're going to be able to take that commission. Those were the three things as I came in that I was surprised to hear. But being a guy that likes history and private equity analysis, I went a little bit through the things that happened through time, right? So the first big scare was Zillow, right? I don't know, just what you remember from back then when Zillow appeared, but there was a lot of discussion over whether now that this estimate was there, what would the agent do, right?
Yeah. What was the need for an agent?
Yes, exactly. Because the value was very represented with, oh, they're actually telling me if I'm a seller, how much I'm going to be able to sell my house for, and if a buyer, they're being able to negotiate with me. If now I know the price, then I can do this on my own, right?
Right.
Now, the crazy thing, which we can see here is, and I didn't even know this until I updated the slide a few days ago, is FISBOs are at an all-time low, all-time low. And the fact that they have gone from 13% in 2008 to like a 5% now tells you how much of the effect that was expected from all these technology replacing tasks had nothing to do with the actual reality, right? Because in the end, the true value of the agent has nothing to do with this estimate valuation or with this or that trick that technology can do, but with the idea of having a quarterback that is going to protect you through the most complex transaction in your life, right? And that has clearly held through time. That the real estate transaction hasn't become more easy for individuals to handle. Government doesn't make things easier. So more and more, we need our real estate agents to take care of us on both sides, on the buy side or on the sell side. But the first scare was this, was Zillow and their Zestimate, and whether that would make agents obsolete, and it didn't. And so, first data point, first big scare of the industry, although there probably was one before that I don't remember. I guess 2008, I was not here. But this one was clearly proven wrong through time, even to today when FISBOs are at an all-time low. Now, the second one, and this is a big one, I'm going to put one culprit. Do you have us all on mute? Just checking because I have kids in. Yes, you're all on mute unless you asked to be taken off mute.
And
So,
that fact there isn't quite surprising because the studies have shown that for sale by owners tend to sell for about 17% less.
yes,
So
and
someone
so
trying to save a little bit of commission, we overcome more than what we charge.
absolutely. And you have that chart in the right. FISBO Home sold for how much less, right? NAR loves to put this data point, and it is true, although it is sometimes difficult to separate correlation from causation, right? Because some people might say, well, it's because the low-end houses are the ones that sometimes drive FISBO. But that should still say something, right? The fact that people selling their $10 million homes are not taking the risk of selling it themselves. They're the ones that are paying the most commission, right? You
That's
must have
right.
some good big sales there in Pensacola, Jessica.
I think I've had three in the last month that tried to sell it for sale by owner that's called me in
Oh, that's why
when
it's
they
the
fail.
biggest opportunity for realtors to go after failed FISBOs, right?
Mhm.
FISBOs and
Yeah.
expireds. But for me, a bigger risk, because this one, I think I would have skipped this risk if I had been in the industry at the time. But for me, the biggest one came from the discount brokers, right? And not to name names, but the biggest one of them all was, of course, Redfin, right? Redfin came in and gave what I would have thought would have killed the industry, which is seller commission of 1%, and later buyer commission of 1% because they were giving a 2% rebate, right? That in itself was really what I thought, okay, this could have a significant impact on commissions. Now, I'll ask you live, Jessica, and anyone can put their thoughts in the chat. How much money do we think Redfin actually has made in since its inception to today? If you had to guess the profit of Redfin, what would you say?
Overall, I mean, I think they've lost money overall. So I don't know that they've been successful over the long term. I think they may have had a little success right there in the beginning, but in the long run, I think I don't even know if they're still in business, are they?
Well, they are. They got bought. They got bought
Okay.
by a
They've
big
pretty
loan
much
bank.
exited our market.
The thing is, and so you're absolutely right. In fact, not only did they lose money, Mark is going to be surprised. Mark thinks they made 150 million. This is gonna let me. Oh, I need to click here. Redfin has lost an accumulated 500 million
Wow.
in since inception to today. Not only that, think about 2021 and 2022, the best years of the real estate industry. In 2022, the best year in the real estate industry, Redfin
The biggest
was able
loss.
to lose 300 million, right? It's insane. And look at the spend in marketing, right? Over $500 million spent in marketing. The loss is much more than 500 million. 500 million is what Redfin actually spent in marketing. Now, if you think that you can sell a commodity for a third of the price, and you can put $500 million in marketing to tell everyone that you're selling a commodity for a third of the price, you would absolutely win that industry. The reason that they didn't is because this is not a commodity, because the service of an agent is not a commodity. And so I'll ask one more question. What do you think is their market share? So, okay, they're losing money, okay, but they're giving away the farm, and they're losing money because they're only charging 1%. What would you say is the share of the market that they have?
Less than 1%, I would
And
guess.
you're absolutely right. That is what they do. They have never, and Laura had it pretty close there. Yeah, zero
Oh,
point 0.8,
wow.
0.5. This is, if you give me $500 million of marketing money and I am able to charge a third and operate at a loss for 8 years, and all I get is a 0.78% of market share, that has to tell you that this is not an industry that is driven by price. And that is actually a very inelastic industry where quality of service is really what people are about because of what you said, Jessica, which is you're not going to risk underselling or fumbling the sell or the buy of your home because of something that is it's a fringe of the value of the home, right? And so,
Right.
in fact, Redfin lost much more than 500 millions, spent 500 million in marketing, never reached more than 1%. But more than anything, that did not change. This is the aggregate commission of seller and buyer. And if you see it through time, it did not change it. If anything, it went up, right? And I don't think it went up because of Redfin. I won't give them that. But it just responds to other market dynamics, right? Responds to seller market, buyer market, and things that make people more confident with negotiating that price or not with a realtor. But it absolutely had no effect, right? So two big scares that didn't happen. Zestimate didn't erode the agent's value. Redfin did not drastically change the commission structure. And then the last scare, which by now I think we all laugh, but at the time probably didn't, was iBuyers, right? Which is a different threat, right? This threat is private equity money saying this whole buy and sell thing, we can do it better in a centralized manner. If we hold all the strings, we can use economies of scale to flip houses. We can do all of these things. And one of the main levers from the iBuyers was the idea originally, they then backtracked from that, that they would not have had to pay those commissions, right? Now, this one, I'm not even going to do the drum roll because, like, we all know how this ended, right? iBuyers, and it was not because of a bad market. It ended like this because there is a reality, which is flipping houses is really hard. You need to be a local expert, knowing what you do, using the right person to repair the home, using the right agent to sell and buy, instead of trying to do it at a national level, thinking that economies of scale are going to save you from the locality that is so real in real estate. Did you have a lot of iBuying during in Pensacola, or
We had a
did
little
never got
bit,
there?
but very little. Our market definitely is not one that flipping makes sense for because our margins are so small. No matter how much you fix up an $80,000 house, it's not going to go for much more than 150, 200,000. So we just didn't have those swings and the ability to make the profit there. We had a little bit of it going on, but it didn't last long at all.
Yeah. And I remember I had when so I came to the US for business school, and while I was at Stanford, I had one of my professors who I went back to speak at his class a couple of times, and he was obsessed with real estate, and he was a huge believer of the iBuying model. And so I had long arguments with him, very theoretical arguments, but the whole reason iBuying could work, and I don't want to go too far into it, but iBuying could work at a low, if you don't expect to take over the market. If you're okay with doing 5% of all of the transactions of the US, there are people that are willing to sell their home in a rush for less money, and get the value from your convenience. The problem is when iBuyers, and especially Zillow, tried to say, well, no, 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 we can sell and buy at marketplace, so we'll make no margin there. And that way we can capture the whole market. And all our profit needs to come from just being better at these things, at flipping a house, at repairs and those kind of things, or at being able to operate without an agent, which they were never able to do. And so I know that this one is no surprise for everyone. The crush and burn of the iBuyers was is known by now. But I say it so that you all remember it because there's a new scare coming about the agents going away. And I think it's important for us to remember the times that we thought the industry was ending and it did not. And out of each of these, the agents came out stronger and more assured of themselves. And through all of these, which we'll see later, the better agents came better and the weaker agents came worse. So this different threats on the industry have always been leading the industry towards less agents doing more transactions. That's why the common joke here, there's a million agents, but only 20%. Well, that's because this industry there's been a flight towards quality that you can see through time. Let me
And I
see.
think we'll continue to have those threats and we'll continue to have people say that when they think a computer can replace us or an AI model. And
Yeah,
ultimately, what we do cannot be replaced by any system.
100%.
No one's going to
I
take no system's going to take their call at 9 o'clock at night and talk them off the ledge when they're crying.
100%. And the system might take the call, but will not have, even if the AI has empathy and all of those things that we work as a tech person myself, that we work to have, there is no replacement for trust. And I don't think I have JD on the phone here, but on the webinar. But with more time, when I was moving to Atlanta in 2017 to moving to be at CINC, I have this. I very suddenly, as I was moving into my house and whatever, I discovered that my mother had pancreatic cancer, and it was a very short time, and so I entered a little bit into panic mode and flew to Argentina. And from that plane, I was basically texting JD to see if we could rent something if I had to move her because I want her in Emory and whatever and da, da, da. That's all things that I will not do with a clerk that works for a salary, right? That's someone that I have a fiduciary and trusted relationship that I can put my life in the hands of them, right? And who can give me tough love, tough advice. Like when I looked at my number 40 house, he was like, "Hey, at some point you need to settle down into something." So those are all things that simply an employee working for a salary will not do, and that for me is the fiduciary duty that has made that the commission has remained what it is in spite of what everyone said. And I don't think it's wishful thinking, right? I think it's that reality has proven these things that we're saying, right? But let me move. So that was a little bit of history, probably longer than I should have spent, but I wanted to go to what really happened in 2014, right? And I will say this, in all the time, I haven't seen such a concentrated and dedicated attack against the real estate agent. And oh, let me see. Uh, and again, I'm not, my intention is never to get political in these things, and this is not an opinion on Biden himself. It has not happened in the history of the US that a president of the US does what, let me show the clip for a second. So he said two things. He said now for the first time, the Association of Realtors has agreed that we're going to be able to negotiate commissions when we're trying to get a sale of a home. And he said, I beseech or encourage real estate agents to lower their commission in order to make house buying more affordable. So those two things were his main points, and then he went to, of course, something about equity. But the first one is, of course, false, and we all here know it, right? Everyone could always negotiate their commission. That was in the contract, was negotiable before. That's why I would believe at the time that things were not going to change because the market was already operating. The second one is almost like the president of the United States is asking a player in the marketplace to lower their compensation, right? And he even said, that's the third part that I was blanking, well, this could save up to $10,000 in the buying of a house, which that's all the commission of one of the two sides at least, right?
Yeah,
So
he
it's
actually
basically
said
saying,
this would lower
well,
the cost.
see if you can lower your compensation for making this more affordable.
Mhm.
I had never seen that before. And that for me, even though I strongly believed that the commissions were at the right place and had been set by market, the influence of a president of the United States saying that publicly, I thought would, okay, this might trigger at least some negotiations. Some people will have heard it and say like, hey, I want to negotiate my commission, right? And you had all of the major, again, I don't think that Biden had anything in particular versus realtors. I think this was what was being fed to him and what was being said, which is, you see CNN, the 6% commission of buying and selling is gone. New York Times, National Association of Realtors agrees to slash commissions, which is not true, right? This is blatantly factually not correct by the main news outlets of the United States, right? Realtor lawsuit settlement will change the housing market forever. That one at least is not factually cannot be challenged factually, right? This was in my time in real estate, the one time you had the lawsuits, you had, unfortunately, now having to settle. You had every major news outlet saying that that commissions were going to go down, and you had the president of the United States go on national TV and said, "Yes, you should go and negotiate your commission, and hey, realtor, please bring your commission down." Right now, whether we think it's right or wrong, of course, I think it's wrong, but independently of that, that had never happened before at that level. And the part that there was also talk about the DOJ actually forcing the decouple of the commission, right? And there was a lot of fear of, well, the DOJ will not allow co-brokerage, right? Will not allow the seller to share commission with the buyer, right? It is true that the seller was running the main part of the negotiation on behalf of both. Although it's not factually true, the buyer could already do what we're going to go now, which is set a separate buyer agreement with the buyer and define either higher or lower than that, which has come more to light. But it was
or we also did that with for sale by owners. They may not have been offering something, but we negotiated that in and got, and asked for that for our buyers.
Directly with the seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, welcome.
Okay, let me get back. What I was trying to say is that in some cases, both seller and buyers were not negotiating. Sellers were being dictated by realtors of what the commission would be, and buyers had no say in the structure at all.
And that was the nature of the lawsuits, right? Whether the seller was really explaining, the seller agent was really explaining to the seller the whole thing. And again, the US is a peculiar place, right? The other day, I heard a lady sued a Carnival cruise because they gave her too many tequilas and she fell down and hurt herself, right? And so there is the nature of the US that it's always like something happens to me, it might not be my fault. Who can I? And so again, I don't say it as a negative. I'm a huge fan of the US and I love this country that I've immigrated to, but that is a reality of why NAR should have been more careful on the way that they worded things in not giving the impression that these things were not optional. But anyone that read the contract knew that they had the option to negotiate what they wanted as a seller, right? And again, and the buyer in itself, if the seller is willing to put a percentage that can be divided between buyer and seller, then why would the buyer oppose to that? He's just fighting for the price that he's going to have to pay, right?
And ultimately, the seller had options. We just went through all of the failed options that they had, whether it was an iBuyer, whether it was a 1%, whether it was, they had other options.
Redfin spent $500 million telling them, you don't need to list for that 3%. You can list for a 1%, please. And even with that effort, sellers were not choosing that. And so what I mean is, in lawsuits after the fact, people always want to say, I didn't know, I didn't. In this, my thought, and we'll see now the results, is that it's a lie that the sellers were being deceived. I think in 95% of the cases, people knew, but we would see after the fact. But one of the main things was the DOJ was flirting with the idea of decoupling the commission. Now, the main change that would do, I could talk for a while of why price wouldn't change and compensation would be the same, but the coupling would make it that the payment of the buyer commission would come out of pocket instead of being bundled into the mortgage, right? That would have been a big change, but that would
have done the exact opposite. Instead of lowering the cost of housing and lowering the barrier to entry to get into a house, it would have meant more out-of-pocket cash for a buyer and make it even harder to get into a home.
Especially to first home buyers and veterans,
Absolutely.
right, that are putting almost no down. In fact, without going too much of the rails on my side, I think that if they had done that, mortgage banks would have accepted loaning money directly to the buyer for that. But that's we can go deep into that. But all that I mean by that is the other player here, which is the mortgage loan banks. They're not naive. They know when they're setting the values of these homes that includes closing costs. It's not that they haven't thought about it. They know, and that's why they have their down payments and they have their risk assessment, right? But this was the second big risk. Now, the biggest risk of all, unfortunately, well, I'll go briefly on this. I think the changes that NAR accepted were very reasonable. Not that setting the lawsuit, I think, well, I'll reserve my opinion so that I don't get sued, but I really don't agree with those lawsuits. But the changes that NAR did were very reasonable. First, saying, no, yes, you don't have to do sharing of commission, which was always true, but they're just being more vocal now and more careful of how they say. Then they put in the rule that we'll come back to, which is the requirement to have written representation in order to show a house, right? Which, in my opinion, was a great change. And finally, they did something that I don't agree with, but I understand, which is they limited MLSs from showing who was going to share which commission, right? This third case probably gave more work to you all and more necessity to go and call back and forth with seller agents, right? Because you need to know now, especially if you have a buyer agreement with your buyer, that they're going to have to pay out of pocket if the seller is not giving it. You need to be able to tell your buyer whether that house is going to cover or not your expenses, right?
So I think actually it depends on the approach. And I think because we haven't all taken a similar approach, it's made it more complicated and more paperwork. I approach it a little differently. Just like if my buyer is going to need closing costs covered, I'm going to show the house whether the seller says they're going to pay closing costs or not, and I'm going to negotiate in the contract. And the
Yeah.
same way with my buyers, if they need the buyer broker fee covered, I'm going to show the house and negotiate it either way, no differently. So I don't actually call and ask for if there is anything being offered. I've been told that there's not, and I still negotiated it in and got it covered for my buyer. So it's all a negotiation. I think the hard part is we have some agents relying on that, and then we have some agents, relying on doing it the way I'm doing it. And so that's where I think it makes it a little bit harder. But
Well, for me, the bigger issue is the lack of transparency to the buyer, right? Because in what you're saying, I understand that you're confident on your skills, and I understand why, but because I've seen you negotiate. But for me, the issue is the seller, the buyer, doesn't know whether they're going to have to pay your commission out of pocket until they find that out. Now, they can trust that you're going to be able to negotiate at the end, and there's good reason to know that. But the truth is, they should know, right? They should know from the get-go when they're looking at a house and getting their hopes up or not, that, well, the seller is not including in that seller price a commission towards your realtor. So you need to internally be aware of that. And if you're going to have to pay it out of pocket, you especially need to be aware of that. And so, again, most of the times it will be dealt in negotiation and it's not a problem. But this, for me, this third move was certainly a lack of transparency. It did the opposite of what the lawsuits were supposed to bring, which was more transparency. Now, buyers today have less knowledge as they go into a house of what's the exact cost of it.
Yeah, I do think though it did take it to a different level with some more transparency if you do it the way I was talking about, because it becomes a part of the contract. It's not something being done co-broke behind the scenes. It's literally a part of the buyer's contract. So it is fully disclosed on what they are asking for and what compensation is being covered for that buyer.
So you are being more transparent, for sure,
Absolutely.
right? By having a buyer agreement, you're having that discussion up front, which we'll go in a second, is for me, that second change here on this page is the best change of all. You're being more transparent. What's less transparent, in my opinion, is the buyer himself, forget the agent, when
Mhm.
they walk into a house to see the house, they know the price. The price they know it's they can go and see what's the selling asking price, but they don't know if that includes or not a huge a closing cost component, which is the buyer's agent commission. And that's my point of less transparency. But I agree with you that the buyer agreement up front has improved this industry significantly.
And having the co-broke or buyer broker commission in the actual contract,
Yes, I
where it
fully
wasn't
agree.
before in the sales contract, not just the buyer broker contract, but the
But the
actual sales contract. It's in that now, at least in Florida, I think in other states as well, but it is actually a part of that now.
Yeah, 100%. And so, but the most dangerous thing for me that happened out of all of these is what surprised me the most, which was this, which was the industry. Actually, I don't know. Let's try something and see if it works. Jen, can you share the poll of like
Yep.
who thought that commissions were going to go up or down at that moment? So the main thing that I found was that almost everyone that I discussed this with in the industry at the time really believed that the buyer commission was done. That it was really either going to be cut in half or changed into a flat fee. I had a slide that I took away where I had a lot of industry experts, coaches, etc., and what they said at the time. I took it out because I'm not willing. No, it's not my intention to pick on anyone. It was scary how many top realtors, clients of mine that that are at the top of their game, that have actually done very well, coaches, industry experts, um, competitors of mine that were absolutely trying to shift, and it was all about pivot. Like you need to pivot, and telling agents how it's important to be able to roll with the times. And the main thing is this is one where perception could lead to reality, right? Even if all the things that we just said were true, which they are, if all agents start reducing their commission at the same time, the commissions are going to come down. It's just it's a natural thing. And so this one was the one that scared me the most, and it's probably the main reason that I'm doing this webinar. Jen, were we successful? Did we have a poll?
Yep. So majority said that they thought commissions would be down.
Okay. Well, and this is today, after the fact, right? When some of us, and when we did this poll back then, it was closer to 70%. So not only realtors believed it, industry experts were saying it. I had one anecdote, a very good friend of mine, when Fidelity called us to ask us what we thought was going to happen with all of this. They called their tech experts that were in real estate. Everyone was wondering what's the impact going to be. And a very good friend of mine was explaining how he thought sellers were not going to offer co-broke ever again, and this was done. And yes, the buyer agents are going to have to see if they can get something from the buyer. Maybe they can get a 1%, but it's not going to be. And I said at the time, I think it's going to be unchanged. In fact, we did a webinar. I think we'll put it in the chat where we made a significant statement back in March of 2024 saying commissions will not change. I'm a free market guy. I believe that the market was already acting well. And for the things that we just discussed, no one's real interest was for this to be decoupled or go down. And so, oh yeah, we put it there in chat. If you want to go deep into these subjects that I've just gone over, you can have my full argument there, but I won't bore you now with that. My main thing is when these things happen, if we don't have actors in our industry like giving that counter opinion to, it's always easier to be the doomsayer because everyone wants to sell change, right? It's always boring to say, no, 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 things are going to be the same that they've been in the last 2 years. But I think when we have our new scare coming with AI and all of that, we need to remember this, and we need to speak out when we think that what's being said is not true.
Because you're
And so with
absolutely right. If no one was speaking out against it, it could have become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We could have done it to ourselves.
100%, 100%. Even if the underlying forces were already the right ones, you're providing value to the market, there's no question that if all your peers start reducing their commission, you're going to have to do it, right? It's very few realtors would be able to stand out. And so that I don't say it specifically for what happened then. What I'm saying is with the next one that is coming, we need to remember this because we cannot break as an industry and give in to fear when the underlying factors have proven time and time again that the agent is indispensable and valuable. And so I'll go now to the punchline of this webinar, which is what happened, right? We're standing 2 years after. Did commissions go down? Didn't go down. My friend and I had a bet where I said that in no possible world the buyer side commission was going to go under 2% on average. He told me I was smoking stuff, and in fact I was I was wrong. It didn't go even close to a 2%. The buyer commission saw almost no change at all. If you can see this graph, the blue line is what the commission was in 2023, so around 2.55, 57%. Then in 2024, which is the black line, you do see an impact. Now, that impact is like a 0.1%, right? 0.15%. It is insignificant. If you think that the President of the United States went on TV and said, A, you need to negotiate with your agent, and B, please, agents, reduce your commissions, and that did not move this number by more than 0.1%. That tells you how resistant this price is, how inelastic it is. Of course, if Redfin couldn't move it by giving away for 1%, no one is going to move it. And we're standing the year after. The commission is still on average for buyers 2.4%, going up to 2.42%. I don't have the numbers for 2026, but in the last 3 months, it has gone up slightly, and we're at 2.42%. Not only that is super insignificant, is when you look at variation of commissions through time, which you're seeing on the bottom right of this page, it shows you that normal variation of other factors has had much more effect than anything of these things that happened last year. I even underestimated how much of a nothing burger this would be on the agent commission. Now, it's not a nothing burger because nothing happened. In fact, it's a little contrary. Two things happened. You did have agents that started to go flat fee or reduce their fee, but you had, because of the buyer agreement that we'll talk now, you had actual agents moving up their commission. And so those two factors have sort of counteracted it themselves. And we'll see it more. I'll give you one more. This is by state. It looks different because it's zoomed in to show the difference. And that's when people want to lie to you with stats, they do these things where the chart starts at 2.1%. So the changes seem much more extreme. The previous chart gives you the real view. But this is good to see how state by state. And you can see that the West Coast states, like California and Oregon, have suffered more in the commission. They went from a 2.4 to a 2.2, or even a 2.1, while states like Texas have remained almost unchanged, right? And the states like Arizona and Washington, that are West Coast states, also suffered some of it, but they're on their way back. Again, we're talking about insignificant. That's a good point. Price point has continued to go up. We have price point in a little bit. So commissions have gone up in general, although now price points are starting to fall. So it's going to, but in the end, do you think it has remained unchanged because market conditions have changed since the pandemic? So we'll see in a bit, because I have a slide, that price of homes escalated in 2021, 22, and then have become mostly flat. So this change between 24 and 25, it really is independent of everything because it's just no change at all. Of 0.1%. Again, this particular change in California and Oregon, I think has more to do with the particular situations of those states than in general with what's happening with commissions around the place. But in all, look at whatever state that you look. This has not have a real impact on the business model, on buyer agents and seller agents. In fact, seller commissions went down at the beginning in 2000, a little bit later. So they didn't go down in 2024, which is the orange one. They were a little bit lower in 2025. And now they're coming back up in 2026. So seller commissions, very similar. Of course, there's no flat fee in seller commissions. So it's a little more stable. But overall, the answer is all the same, which is nothing happened. Now, what I was saying before is something has happened. There have been a few agents that started with the flat fee scenario, which you can see in this table is that yellow line at the bottom. So you now have 5 or 6% of transactions that happen with a flat fee. But what you can see here, this blue line, this is agents charging more than 3%. And that has been ongoing for the last 9 months, up and up and up and up, and has continued into this year. So because of the buyer agreements that we'll talk in a second, good agents, strong agents are being able to explain their value and drive a higher commission. And that has compensated for the people that have gone to a discount agent at a flat fee.
I think it really opened the conversation up. It gave the buyer the opportunity to start having conversations, and used to the buyers went with normally the first agent they ever spoke to.
Because of the argument of like, well, you don't pay for it anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now
and
they're
that's
aware.
why speed to lead was so important, because they went with the first person they spoke to. Now they're asking the questions and they're choosing who represents them a little bit more. I think that was a good side effect of this.
Absolutely. It was the best decision that NARD did. And it was already there. You had the buyer agreement, but it had the effect that now, because consumers are aware of it, it is easier for agents to broach the subject. And so now that there is a price to be discussed, it gives the opportunity of the buyer to really defend their value, right? Now, of course, that's not great for agents that don't know how to do that, but it is great for strong agents. This one, I think you guys know it better than me. Seller, like people that are not in real estate thought that, oh, sellers will work directly, double end the deal and keep the money. Seller agents don't want that because the deals fall through, because as you said, Jessica, buyers enter panic mode, and if there's not someone that they trust that is representing them, the deals fall through. And the sellers themselves have no incentive for the buyer to have to pay that commission out of pocket. The price is the same. It will be adjusted in the price in the negotiation. The only question is, do you want the buyer to have to pay it out of pocket? And why would the seller want that? They have no upside for that. It only makes their house less attractive. And again, mortgage banks already knew everything that was happening. But this is the bigger change. Now, this might surprise you. Do you know that still only 50% of buyers actually sign a buyer agreement before going to see a house?
No, that's shocking, because I thought you had to. But I will definitely say that there have been people I've talked to who haven't, which is shocking.
Well, the reason it doesn't shock me as a libertarian is no one is incentivized to enforce this. So NAR's saying it doesn't. You're not gonna, if you're going to do an open house, you're not gonna stop the agent that is bringing you a possible buyer and say, wait, I don't want you in my house if you don't have a buyer agreement, right? Maybe you do. I don't. But the lack of enforcement makes it that there's always going to be people that decide not to do it. But that said, every smart agent today is doing it, right? Like, why not? You have the ability to broach the subject. You have buyers that are now entertaining the possibility, and this is a perfect opportunity. It has had a significant increase. Like, there's been a 30% increase on buyer agreements, but it's less than what people thought. People thought now everyone will have a buyer agreement. Not the case. This is why this webinar is here. Is because you as an industry, I cannot do it. Like, I'm telling you that you as an industry need to be doing this. You have the possibility. The strong agents are doing it. And the gap agent model, you probably are doing this, Jessica, right? Do you want to explain it? So what do you do if the seller is not offering the percentage that you're requesting?
So it depends on, it is a negotiation, and we've talked to the buyer in the beginning and have a buyer broker agreement signed. And then if they are not willing to, the seller is not willing to, there's been many cases that our buyers have actually said, no, you've got me such a good deal on this, I'm going to make up the difference. Our clients have appreciated how hard we've worked for them. And so I have one right now that we were about 0.5% off, but I saved them more than they thought they were going to get off of the house. So they had absolutely no problem making up that difference. They see value in what we do. And I think that's the biggest difference. If they see value and appreciate it, they don't have a problem making up the difference when they need to.
Yes, and that is what it is. I knew agents of mine that were doing this before, where they would say, "I'm a 4%." The seller was never giving more than 3, so they were used to asking for that extra percent. But they were absolute exceptions in luxury markets. This now is something that is in all of your toolkits, right? You are able to negotiate with your buyer upfront. You have to discuss your value and explain why they should choose you, which is why we believe that you need early access to the lead, to the prospect, because you don't want to come in a month before they're going to buy. That's too late. If they're serious, they should have a buyer agreement already. So you want to come in 3 months before. But if you are coming out at that stage and you're able to communicate your value, you're absolutely in the position of establishing your price. That is bringing commissions up, not because agents are putting 4%, but because many buyer agents are putting 3%, where before they were always having to settle in 2.5. So that has had that countering effect to the other one. And this for me has been the biggest outcome of these lawsuits. So I'm going to jump in the last few minutes to buy side versus sell side. But this, if you have to drop off, is the initial intent of this webinar, right? I think I could spend hours talking about this and I would bore you all to death, but it is important for you all to see that the underlying forces of the value that you provide are what have been sustaining your commission all along. Those are real. They were not made up. It's funny when people talk about like, oh, well, how can they make this money and when amount the hours? I know a lot of realtors, some do very well and very wealthy, but we know a ton of realtors that have to work 80 hours, 100 hours a week to make a good living. It is insane to believe that this is an industry of people that are ripping off. In fact, ironically, the lawyers that represented that lawsuit don't charge a flat fee for their hours. They charge a percentage and are insanely wealthy out of what they did because they're charging a percentage. But we're being told in this industry that that somehow you are all being overpaid. This is false. It has been challenged in the courts, and independently of those settlements, now that everyone is aware and that everyone has been told how it has not moved the needle. Realtors, buy-side realtors, at a ton of value coming from Argentina, where we don't have buy-side realtors, and you're basically being represented by the realtor of the seller, which is not great, and you always feel that you're either being taken advantage of, or you have to go visit 5 different brokerages to see all the inventory because no one is sharing with anyone. All that is fixed in the US by having this beautiful model of the buyer agent, and I am so glad that it has, in spite of all of this, it has survived. It has shown its value. And my takeaway to you all is defend your commission because it is being done. Commissions are flat to up, and make sure you're putting those buyer agreements up front and that you're explaining your value. In a different webinar, we can talk about what tools we have to help you explain your value. You should have reviews. We have Real Satisfied if you need it. But this is not a CINC pitch. This is about you and the industry and the position that you should be playing in that.
And I think it's important that, I mentioned some of my success, but there's also times that I've had to walk away because they weren't willing to sign a buyer broker agreement. And that was me protecting my time, because how many times before did we show people property and then they not go through us, or, and if they're not going to give me that same loyalty, I'm not going to be as loyal to them. And I'm not afraid to say that. And it has started to protect my time a lot more. So it's not, I don't want people to think I'm saying I always get everything I ask for. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes I have to know when just to walk away.
Well, the main thing for me is the professionalization of the buyer agent. As a seller agent, as a lister, you're used to going to the listing table and having to fight for your commission, to explain your value. There was a lot of freeloaders on the buy side that were going just by well, I'm free anyway, which they shouldn't, but it's what they said. Now this is forced that discussion up front with the buyer. The buyer still wants representation. The buyer is still willing to pay the percentage. They just are now having to make the decision to hire you instead of just being stringed along. And that's why we believe and I'll talk about it now, on the buy side of things, on online lead generation, and that's why I believe on teams growing on their buy side. I know I'm going to go over time. I don't get offended if anyone needs to leave. Jessica, if you are, don't. I won't get offended by it. But I'll go 10 minutes more, so I go through this. So the main thing is, why am I such a champion of buy side of lead generation? And I'm going to start by being a little paranoid and saying this is not because CINC. CINC sells seller leads. CINC has the referral model with Agent Pronto or ProLink, and CINC also sells as buyer leads. I'm telling you objectively that I believe that home search leads or buy side leads is the best way of successfully and profitably growing an online lead generation arm. Why? The main reason is it is much more normal for a buyer to choose their agent online than for a seller to choose an agent online. It is 3 times as more probable. Why? Because buyers are not looking for agents online. That's why we always tell you don't brand yourself in these things. They're looking for homes. When they find a home that they want to see, they're willing to entertain an agent, whether it's online. They're not looking for an agent in the first place. While sellers who know that they're looking for an agent, many of them prefer to go to people they know or people that has been referred to them. And a lower percentage of them decide to go online to find that agent. Again, we have Agent Pronto, which mainly tries to grab people looking for an agent, but home search leads, in my opinion, especially if you have the execution to have the long-term funnel that you need to have, is the most profitable way of growing your arm. 3 times more, if you see it here, this is the math, 3 times more money is being generated in GCI from online leads on the buy side than on the sell side across the country, right? So if you are going for the sell side, you're fighting for a pot that is a third of the size. And I would say, although I don't have data to support it, more money is going into the sell side than onto the buy side because everyone wants to list homes. Therefore, there's more money going to a smaller group. That's why seller leads are $25, $100, or $500, while buyer leads with a good professional person to procure it can be $8, $9, right? That's the big difference. And if we look, well, this again, more and more people are choosing their realtor online, but this is what you were asking me before. This is what prices have done versus what cost per lead have done since 2015 to today. So I won't surprise you. I shouldn't surprise you by saying that home prices have gone up 50% since 2015. I think we all know it. To understand today that purchasing a home search lead today is exactly the same dollar value than it was in 2015 should be mind-boggling, because there's nothing, not McDonald's, nothing that you do in your life today is the same price that it was in 2015. This is a fantastic evolution of this avenue of revenue, right? Your outcome has improved by 50% and the cost to produce it has remained the same. Now, of course, if you compare to 2020 and 21, it has gone up significantly because 2020, when everyone was at home, everyone was online, and there was a flood of now conversions went down in that period. So there's a counterbalance there. But today, if you think that you need 100 leads, which we could talk at a different webinar, to have one closing at $7.50 a lead, it means you're paying $750 per closing. Of course, there's a lot of effort to get that, which we'll get into a second, but you're paying $750 per extra closing that you want to procure. While if you're doing referral model, like with CINC, with ProLink, you're paying 35, 40% in the case of Zillow, 42, you're paying $4,000 plus on a per sale basis. Depending on your splits, that can mean different things, but basically you're paying 4 to 6 times more on a per closing. That's why those channels, while attractive, end up being non-profitable. That's why when people ask me, hey, can I put more money on seller leads? Can I, no, I'm not going to attend that meeting. So can I put more money on seller leads, or I want to ramp up the referral model, the Agent Pronto model? I go like, careful. Like I don't want you leaning too much on those agent search leads that end up being very expensive, and that it might be good to give an easier closing to your team. But if you learn to rely on that, you're not going to be able to be profitable by the end of the year, right? I want to keep you on the source of leads that is going to be able to make money for you. Now, also, another big factor that we didn't have a few years ago is real verified. Every tech company in the US has always talked about verifying phone numbers and all of that, but we all know that it was not really true. You could verify that it was a phone number, but not that it was from the person that was sending it. Since Real Verified, when we know for a fact, because of two-factor authentication, 70% of the leads are coming in, we know their phone, we know that it is their phone, that has made a huge difference in the industry. So for me, this is much better than it was in 2015. It's not better than it was in 2021. I'll give that. It's probably 20% worse than it was in 2021, but it is still significantly better than what historically it has been. And then a few takeaways here. I know we're over time, but another fallacy today, we all thought that these leads were more 9 to 12 months. 40% of all closings that will happen from home search leads will happen in the first 6 months. So those first 6 months are still critical. Now, you still need long-term follow-up if you want to get the full 1% conversion through time, but focusing on those first 6 months is still critically important. And this is why this game is difficult, and this is why not every client that starts with CINC succeeds, right? Or with alternatives to CINC that rely on home search leads, which is, it is a difficult game. No matter what people pitch to you, and I hope we don't do it, but there's a lot of like, oh, follow-up is becoming so easy, AI this and all that. We could talk for a long time about that. The reality is that the biggest drop-off point is not in getting the consumer to react to you, is in connecting the consumer to the actual realtor at the end, which is an extremely difficult thing to accept for us and hopefully for you too. If we, through AI, and again, everyone will claim their AI does this or that, we could discuss for a long time, but 12% of leads are coming to agent ready, which means they're having a real conversation back and forth with AI. They've texted back 3, 4, 5 times. That's absolutely a total ad bat. And my most frustrating stat in CINC overall is that only 30% of those are called within the first hour. Think about that. That's someone that has texted back and forth with Alex 3, 4, 5 times and said, I want to see a home, I want to talk to an agent, and they're not getting called. And 40% of all transactions that do happen are coming from this 12% of leads. So back to what Jessica was saying before about how speed to lead changed. I don't obsess with telling my clients about speed to lead anymore. I want speed to flag, speed to reaction, right? Yeah, call the leads as they come in, but you can call them prospect in the morning because the one that is doing the speed to lead is Alex. And yes, you should have AI. If you don't want to use CINC, if you want to build your own with ChatGPT, do what you want. But if you don't have an automated way, we'll live in a world of immediacy where people want immediate results. And if you're not able to respond when they need it, then you're letting that client go. So you do need AI. You do need to, but my personal thing is, if you and your team are not focused on having a fail-safe way of responding to those leads that do become apparent, you're absolutely leaving money on the table. Matt, you say the stat is misleading. Which one you're referring to? I'm happy to explain or discuss it more. Okay, I'll see when he talks. But overall, again, I have no bone in this fight, right? All I'm saying, or if anything, from CINC, one of our biggest focuses right now, and I know it's not flashy and it's not, is we are trying to see how we can make it almost impossible for you not to follow up with agent-ready leads, because they are creating almost half of the transactions that are happening. And if at least we had 100% of those leads being called within the first hour, we would be increasing conversion very, very, very significantly. So if you can leave you with something out of this, also is go back to your CINC process or whoever platform you're with, and see what you have in place to make sure that those agent-ready leads, those leads that are engaging with AI, are being responded to immediately. And then this is not a new fact for many, but it is still very real, and that's why we have Home Pulse. Is every home search lead has a high chance, a 50% chance of also being a seller. Now, not all of them want to use you as a seller agent. Not all of them will want to give you their address. That's why we have home pulse that detects 20% of them, but there's still a 30% of that 50 that it is not that it is not so sorry that there's still a 30% that are not telling us CINC that they have own a home, but they own a home. So it's still your job to go and inquire about those things. And now I got the Matt response in that AI ready leads sometimes are misinterpreted by AI. Absolutely, that is absolutely true, Matt. That is, but it is still this stat is still true, which is of the ones that have been identified as AI ready, whether it is including those where AI made a mistake, those 12% of leads are generating 40% of the transactions. So I'm telling you that it is worth your effort even when AI made a mistake. I'm telling you that even if you read the conversation, you got like, oh, this bullshit, this is not AI, right? Doesn't matter. Try it. Try in those ones, right? If you get to 100% of those leads that have been identified as agent ready, think about it. With only 30% of them being contacted, they're generating 40%, whether AI identified them correctly or not. 40% of the transactions are being generated by the 12% of leads. So, mistake or no mistake, this is still in your favor to focus on those. And that's all I have. And I know I'm over. I'll open for questions. I still have a few minutes, but if I leave you with nothing else out of this webinar, here are my takeaways. One, just factual. Real estate buy-side commissions have not changed. No one can deny this. They have not changed. It was false that people were overpaying and they didn't know it. Now they know it and they're paying the same amount. So I think you should feel confident to defend your commission. You have the data to support it. In fact, you have data showing that strong realtors are charging higher commissions. I'm not saying that you should charge a higher commission. You need to charge what you think is right, but you should not feel compelled to lower that commission. The second one is that, again, buyer agreements are extremely valuable. They're something that now are being used in more than 50% of the cases. I don't see reason for you not to use it unless you have a very specific strategy of how you scale things up. The reality is people now are expecting it. NAR has given you help by saying that that you should, and that helps you open the conversation, and it's more transparent for the buyer, for you, and for the industry. It also helps avoid future lawsuits. So in a country that's all about disclaimers, you need that disclaimer, you need that buyer agreement. And then on the other side, I believe, this is Alvaro, although I do say it as CEO CINC, we have products of all kinds for you. If you want seller leads, we're going to give you agent search leads, all of that. I strongly believe buy-side home search leads are the best return on your money. They take work. You need 70 to 100 leads at least per fully dedicated FTE. So if you have two half times, that's fine, but that's a large volume of new leads. You need AI of some kind, either ours or whichever you want. And you need agents that take it seriously, that don't say, oh, well, because AI is doing it, I don't need to do it. If you're not following up with that, it's not going to be happening. Yes, sorry, that's 70 to 100, per month. We have a ton of clients that get 30 or 40 and are happy with it. I'm one that pushes for more, not because more money for CINC, which is not the case, but because I really believe if you're going to put the effort to do this and you're going to put the structure to it, you want to be able to have the upside. And even when things are going well, you're going to be converting at that 1% in the second year, third year, which is still, if you want to have 6, 8, 12 transactions per year, which for me is the floor of what you should have on a 3-year plus basis, you need to be at that level of leads. But I also understand you need a system in order to work those leads. AI needs to be there. Agent Launchpad, the tools, the training. It's not just the system. That's why we have Blueprint. We can share later all the different training. Online objection handling training is super important. It's different than your expertise as a realtor. Many of you already know it. But for people that are newer to CINC, don't underestimate it. Whether you come to CINC or whether you join Blueprint or any of our online tools, it will make an absolute difference. But my bigger point is you need to try to avoid paying $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per sale on your main avenue of growth. If you want that kind of thing for something that is additional and some few extra sales, hurt no one. But if you're going to grow your business on those sales, that you're spending half the GCI on procuring the sale, that's not scalable. So unfortunately, I know that I'm always the one that gives the bad news, but it's still a hard job. It requires organization, technology, and dedication of the agents. But once you have that system going and you're able to procure sales for $1,000, maybe $2,000 a sale, that's where you can scale that, be profitable, and take it as a long-term sustainable way to grow your business. Okay, I've talked nonstop for an hour and something. I'm done. I don't have anything else. I'm open to questions to anyone that wants to stay and ask a question. I will say thank you all of you for attending. Thank you for being part of CINC. And again, we really appreciate every time that you engage with us in all of the ways, Facebook messages, and we do this because I do believe in realtors above everything else, if that's not evident already. And I love to be in a company that bets on that and not on replacing the realtor. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you for bearing with me and giving an alternative voice.
Thank you for having me. Last minute.
Any questions, you or anyone, anything on this that I should add? We will share the slides. We will also load it up on YouTube so that people can get upset with me or be happy. And if you want to go look at the one that we did in March of 2024, if you're interested on seeing more deep dive of the history and what we thought would change or not, I think it's interesting, but it's all past history. This is the future. So
you just want everyone to see your prediction was right, huh?
There's a little bit of that. But then now we can, when we do the prediction again in the next time that we get scared about technology replacing the agents, we have one last time to go reference to.
Yeah. Hey, as long as the agents continue to grow their knowledge, they will continue to be valuable and we will never be replaced. It's when we stop continuing to learn and grow and better serve our clients is when we will be replaced.
Nothing is changing in the underlying fact, which is that people want to be well represented in the most complex and probably important transaction of their life. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't do, like I sometimes use the divorce example. No one wants to get a divorce and use the lawyer of their spouse or ex-spouse, and no one would want to go through that without being represented. And same thing here. You're going through a big complex transaction. Agents are extremely valuable. I think of that personally. So yeah, I don't think that's going anywhere.
I agree.
Does CINC have any insights or for call screening applications? Yes. So that's interesting. If you need to be, and this CINC can do it, so talk to your account manager. You need to be, of course, 10DLC signed up. You need to have the shake and stir. We have a couple of things. Now, those don't mean that you cannot be screened, but they improve the chances of the phone carriers not blocking you as spam. Also, when we put limitations on how to use texting and those things that we do, everything we do in that, we have a whole team that the only thing that does is phone deliverability, right? The game today is getting as many of your texts through to the recipient as we can, and calls too. And so for that, we have a dedicated team. Feel free to talk specifically to your account manager. All of you should be inscribed in 10DLC, shake and stir, all of the things that we have tapped these phone carriers to be the best possible players in their market. Okay, so with that, without more questions, I'm gonna shut it off. Thank you all. See you soon. I hope you come visit us for CINC. Let us know. We're here in Atlanta, and have a great rest of the week.